2 days before finals, Dad sold my laptop to buy my brother a gaming rig. He told me to figure it out. I did, by leaving forever. Years later, they asked for money. I sent a magazine cover revealing I was a CEO. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence in the house was usually my cue to work. It was 4 in the morning, the witching hour for computer science majors, the only time the world felt still enough to hold the complex architectures of code in my head without them collapsing under the weight of distraction. I had been surviving on 3 hours of sleep a night for the past 2 weeks, fueled by cheap instant coffee and the terrifying, exhilarating proximity of the finish line. Final exams were 48 hours away. My senior thesis project, a complex predictive algorithm that constituted 40% of my final grade, was sitting on my desktop, 95% compiled, waiting for the final optimization pass. I swung my legs out of bed, my eyes burning as I blinked against the darkness. My stomach was already churning, a familiar acid mix of anxiety and adrenaline. I didn't mind the nausea, I welcomed it. It meant I was close. I was going to be the first person in this house to get a degree that actually meant something, a degree that wasn't just a piece of paper, but a key to a door that locked from the inside. I walked into the small alcove off the kitchen that my parents graciously referred to as the study, though it was really just a glorified storage closet where they piled unmatched Tupperware and old tax returns. I reached for the power button on my laptop. My hand met smooth, cold wood. I paused, blinking. My brain, sluggish from exhaustion, didn't compute the sensory input immediately. I swiped my hand back and forth across the desk surface. Empty. I frowned, a sharp spike of panic piercing through the grogginess. I patted the floor. Maybe I had knocked it off. No, maybe I had taken it to my bedroom. No, I never moved it. It was too heavy, an old workstation beast I had bought refurbished 3 years ago, and the battery was shot, so it had to be plugged in constantly. I turned on the overhead light, wincing as the yellow glare flooded the cramped space. The desk was bare, not just the laptop, the power brick, the cooling pad, the external mouse. All of it was gone. "Mom," I called out, my voice cracking. It was too early for them to be up, but panic overrides etiquette. "Dad." I ran into the living room, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The house was quiet, disturbingly so. I checked the kitchen counter. Nothing. I checked the dining table. Nothing. Then I saw it. In the corner of the living room, where my brother Tyler usually sprawled on the couch watching streams on his phone, there was a stack of boxes. Large, sleek black boxes with aggressive red branding, a new curved monitor, a towering glass-sided PC case, a mechanical keyboard. My blood ran cold. A vase. I spun around. My father, Frank, was standing in the hallway, scratching his stomach through his t-shirt. He looked annoyed, his eyes puffy with sleep. "What are you screaming about? It's 4 in the morning." "Where is my computer?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Dad, where's my laptop? I have finals in 2 days. My thesis is on it." Frank yawned, stretching his arms over his head. He didn't look at me, he looked past me, toward the kitchen, as if deciding whether to start the coffee pot. "Oh, that. Yeah, we need to talk about that." "Talk about what?" I stepped closer to him, my hands shaking. "Where is it?" "I sold it," he said. He said it so casually. He said it with the same tone one might use to say they took out the trash or watered the plants. I felt the air leave the room. You what?" "I sold it," Frank repeated, finally making eye contact. His expression was flat, completely devoid of guilt. "Yesterday afternoon, my buddy at the pawn shop gave me a decent rate for it, considering how old it was. Added that to the savings, and boom." He gestured vaguely toward the tower of boxes in the living room. "Tyler's setup is sorted." I stared at him, my mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. "You sold my laptop. with my thesis on it to buy Tyler, video games. It's not just video games, Faith, Frank snapped, his tone shifting from casual to defensive instantly. Your brother has been going through a very hard time lately. His anxiety is through the roof. He needs an outlet. He needs a way to unwind. You know how he gets when he's stressed. I have finals in 48 hours, I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. I need that computer to graduate. My code is on there. Did you at least back up the files? Frank scoffed, walking past me into the kitchen and starting the coffee maker. I didn't have time to mess around with your files, Faith. I wiped it. Standard procedure before selling electronics. Don't look at me like that. You're smart, you're resourceful, you'll figure it out. I stood frozen in the hallway, the physical sensation of heartbreak spreading through my chest like poison. It wasn't just the machine, it was the hours, the sleepless nights, the years of striving to prove I was worth something in this house. You wiped it, I whispered, the finality of it crashing down on me. Stop being dramatic, Frank called out over the gurgle of the coffee machine. Tyler needed this. You've been hogging the bandwidth and the space for 4 years. It's his turn. I looked at the boxes in the corner. The setup must have cost $2,000, easy. My laptop, my lifeline, had been sold for scrap to fund a toy for a 24-year-old man who hadn't held a job for longer than 3 months in his entire life. The betrayal hit me harder than the failure looming over my head. It was a physical blow that nearly brought me to my knees. The next hour was a blur of frantic, nauseating desperation. I scrambled into my clothes, my fingers fumbling with buttons, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I had to get to the pawn shop. Maybe they hadn't wiped it yet. Maybe Frank was lying about the wipe. He wasn't tech-savvy enough to do a secure wipe, surely. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door, ignoring Frank, who was now sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone, a mug of coffee in hand. He didn't even look up as I slammed the front door. I drove to the shop Frank mentioned, parked in the empty lot, and waited. It was 5:00 a.m. They didn't open until 9:00. I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic, clutching the steering wheel, shivering despite the heat of the morning sun beginning to rise. I replayed the conversation in my head. It's his turn. His turn for what? Tyler had been given every turn. He had been given tutors, sports camps, cars, bail money, twice. I had been given a roof and a lecture about how expensive I was. By the time the owner unlocked the gate at 8:55 a.m., I was a wreck. I practically fell through the door. The laptop, I gasped to the man behind the counter. My father, Frank. He sold a laptop here yesterday, a heavy black workstation. Please, I need to buy it back. I'll pay you double whatever he got. The man looked at me, chewing on a toothpick, unimpressed by my tears. He typed slowly into his computer. Frank, yeah, came in yesterday, brought in a workstation, heavy brick. Yes, is it here? Nope, the man said, popping his lips. Sold it an hour after he brought it in. Some kid needed parts for a server build. It's gone, sweetheart. Did you wipe it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Company policy, he said, tapping a sign on the wall. All data destroyed upon receipt, liability. I walked out of the shop, the world gray and muted. It was gone. My thesis was gone. The only backup I had was on a cloud drive that hadn't synced in 3 days because Frank had changed the Wi-Fi password to prioritize the stream for Tyler's iPad, and I hadn't been able to reconnect in time. I had 3 days of coding lost, the most critical 3 days. Without the machine to run the compile, I couldn't even attempt to rewrite it. I drove home, a hollow shell. When I walked back into the house, the atmosphere had shifted. The silence of the morning was gone, replaced by the hum of activity. Tyler was awake. He was in the living room, surrounded by styrofoam and plastic wrap. He had the new monitor set up on a folding table he'd dragged in from the garage. The tower was humming with a soft, expensive purr of RGB lighting. Yo, Faith, Tyler said, not looking away from the screen where a game character was running through a war zone. Dad said you were freaking out. You need to chill. Your vibe is messing with my focus. I stood in the doorway, staring at him. He was wearing pajama pants and a stained t-shirt. He looked perfectly content, perfectly cared for. You knew, I said softly. You knew he took my computer. I needed the upgrade, Tyler shrugged, clicking his mouse furiously. My old setup was lagging. Dad said your laptop was just sitting there gathering dust anyway. You're always just reading on it. I was coding, I said. I was building a career. Susan, my mother, walked in from the kitchen with a plate of toast. She set it down next to Tyler's elbow. Eat while it's hot, honey, she cooed. Then she looked at me, her expression tightening into a grimace of pity that felt more like annoyance. Faith, honestly, Susan sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. Don't look at your brother like that. He's sensitive. You know how hard it is for him right now. Hard, I laughed, a dry, cracking sound. He's playing video games, Mom, I'm about to fail out of university because Dad sold my property. It's family property, Susan corrected me instantly, her voice dropping to that steel tone she used whenever I challenged the status quo. And we do what we have to do for family. Your father decided this was best. You're smart, Faith. You always land on your feet. Tyler needs help. I looked at them. The tableau of dysfunction. The mother feeding the grown man-child, the father counting the cash he made from cannibalizing his daughter's future. I felt a strange clarity wash over me. It was cold and sharp, like inhaling ice water. You're right, I said quietly. I am smart. I turned and walked toward my room. Where are you going? Susan called after me. I need you to help me clear out the study. Tyler wants to move his desk in there for better acoustics. I'll be right back, I lied. As I walked down the hallway, I passed the calendar hanging on the wall. The date of my graduation was circled in red ink, my ink. Frank had written Tyler's dentist apt over it in thick black marker. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was trapped here, dependent on their whims, bound by the guilt they had fed me since birth. They thought that by taking my tool, they had taken my power. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I didn't need their house, or their internet, or their permission to build my code. I carried the architecture in my mind. To understand why a father would sell his daughter's future for a gaming console, you have to understand Frank. Frank was a man who believed the world owed him a living. He was a consultant, which in our house meant he spent 6 hours a day on LinkedIn reposting motivational quotes, and the rest of the day complaining about how diversity hires were ruining the corporate landscape. He had never held a position of real authority, yet he spoke with the absolute confidence of a Fortune 500 CEO. And then there was Tyler. Tyler was Frank's mirror. In Tyler, Frank saw his own wasted potential. Tyler was the golden boy, the one who was too creative for school, too spirited for a 9-to-5. When Tyler failed math, it was the teacher's fault. When Tyler got fired from the warehouse job for stealing boxes, it was a misunderstanding. I was the overhead costs. I was the one who kept my head down. Since I was 16, I had paid for my own clothes, my own school supplies, my own transport. I worked nights at a data entry firm, keying in numbers until my fingers cramped, just to save enough for that refurbished workstation. I remembered the day I bought it. I brought it home, beaming, proud of the machine that would help me become a software engineer. Frank had looked at it and sneered. What do you need all that horsepower for? You plan on hacking the Pentagon? Waste of money. Could have fixed the transmission on the van with that. He had always resented my ambition. He saw it as an insult. Every A I brought home was a reminder of Tyler's D. Every scholarship letter was a spotlight on Tyler's lack of direction. Now, standing in my bedroom, listening to the muffled sounds of explosions coming from the living room, the full picture came into focus. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't just about money. Frank hadn't sold the laptop just to buy the gaming rig. He had sold it to sabotage me. He couldn't stand the idea that in 2 days I would outgrow him. I would have a degree he didn't have. I would have a starting salary he couldn't match. He wanted to keep me here. He wanted me to fail, so I would stay in the study, fixing the Wi-Fi, doing their taxes, and paying rent to live in the closet while Tyler played soldier in the living room. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, my hair a mess. I looked weak. But inside, the gears were turning. I reached under my mattress and pulled out a manila envelope. I had hidden it there 3 weeks ago. It was an acceptance letter. Not from a university, but from Nova Systems, a ruthless, high-octane tech accelerator program in Seattle. It was a live-in residency. They provided housing, equipment, and a stipend in exchange for intellectual property rights to whatever you built in the first year. It was prestigious, incredibly competitive, and started in 4 days. I hadn't told them. I wanted to surprise them after graduation. I wanted to say, look, I made it. I'm going to be a success. I wanted to see Frank finally look at me with respect. What a joke. I heard Frank laughing in the living room. Look at those graphics, Ty. That's incredible. Worth every penny, huh? Yeah, Tyler grunted. Get me a soda, Dad. Coming right up, champ. The nausea in my stomach vanished. I didn't need the laptop to graduate. I could go to the university lab. I could beg the dean for an extension on the upload. I could sleep in the library for 48 hours and rebuild the code from memory on a loaner machine. Wow. DB hell, it would be nearly impossible. But staying here was death. I opened my closet. I didn't take the clothes on hangers. I didn't take the shoes. I grabbed my backpack, the sturdy, waterproof one I used for campus. I packed 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, my toiletries, and my passport. I took the envelope with the acceptance letter. I zipped the bag shut. It was light. My entire life distilled down to 20 pounds. I walked to the door of my bedroom and looked back. The room was bare, lifeless. It looked like a guest room in a house where guests were tolerated, not welcomed. I walked out into the hallway. Frank was coming out of the kitchen with a can of soda. He stopped when he saw me with the backpack. Going to the library? He asked, a smug smirk playing on his lips. Good, use those resourceful skills of yours. Don't be late for dinner, Mom's making meatloaf. He didn't notice the lack of books. He didn't notice the hiking boots I was wearing. He didn't see me at all. I won't be late, I said calmly. I walked past him, opened the front door, and stepped out into the blinding sunlight. I didn't walk to the car. I walked down the driveway, turned left toward the bus station, and I never looked back. The Greyhound bus smelled of stale tobacco and industrial cleaner. It was a 20-hour ride from my hometown to Seattle, a journey that existed in a fugue state of panic and determination. I didn't have a laptop. I didn't have my degree. I had walked away 48 hours before the finish line of a 4-year marathon, and every mile the bus put between me and that empty desk in the study felt like a physical tearing of skin. I arrived in Seattle with $74 in my bank account. The Nova Systems program provided a living pod, which turned out to be a bunk bed in a shared dorm with 5 other developers, and a monthly stipend that barely covered ramen and bus fare. But they gave me something Frank had taken away: a workstation. A top-of-the-line, dual-monitor setup with processing power that made my old refurbished brick look like a calculator. You're the dropout. That was the first thing the program director, a sharp-eyed woman named Alina, asked me during intake. She was looking at my file. Faith, 3.9 GPA, Dean's List, and you just walked out 2 days before finals? Why? I looked at the sleek black monitors in the lab. I remembered Frank's shrug. I remembered the red lights of Tyler's gaming tower. I had a hardware failure, I said, my voice steady, and I decided I was done waiting for permission to succeed. Elena studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Show me what you can do. For the next 4 years, I didn't just work. I ceased to exist as a human being and became an extension of the code. I didn't go to parties. I didn't date. I didn't visit home. When Christmas rolled around and the other residents flew back to their families, I stayed in the empty dorm, writing scripts to automate cybersecurity protocols. I channeled every ounce of rage, every memory of being called expensive. Every hour I spent doing my parents' taxes while they doted on Tyler into my company. I named it Aegis. It was a predictive security AI designed to detect breaches before they happened. It was the evolution of the thesis Frank had deleted. By year 2, I had investors. By year 3, we had a headquarters in downtown Seattle. By year 4, the present day, Aegis was acquired by a major tech conglomerate, but I remained as CEO. I was sitting in my corner office, overlooking the Puget Sound, when the ghost of my past finally pinged my inbox. I had a strict filter on my email. Anything from my parents' addresses went into a folder marked archive, bypassing my main inbox so I wouldn't have to see it during the workday. But today, my assistant, Sarah, buzzed me. "Faith, you have a flagged email that bypassed the filters. It's marked Urgent Family Emergency. Do you want me to delete it?" My hand hovered over the mouse. Family emergency was Frank's code for I need something. If someone was dead, the police would call. "No," I said, staring at the rain streaking the glass. "Forward it to me." I opened the email. It wasn't about a death. It wasn't about an illness. Subject: Tyler's big news, we need to talk. From frankthetank88@email.com. Faith. Long time no talk. Hope you're doing okay out there. We haven't heard from you in a while. Look, big news, your brother is finally settling down. He proposed to a girl named Jessica last week. She's a great gal, comes from a good family. We're throwing an engagement party next month at the country club. It's going to be a big to-do. Obviously, with the economy the way it is, things are tight. Since you're out there working in computers, we figured you're probably doing decent. We need you to chip in. We're looking at about $5,000 to cover the deposit and the catering. Send it to my PayPal. Also, you should come. It would look bad if you weren't there. Let me know when you send the cash. Dad. I read it twice, then a third time. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I was alive. He didn't apologize for selling the laptop that forced me to flee with nothing but a backpack. He just assumed that because I was working in computers, I was an ATM. You're resourceful, figure it out. The words echoed in my head. I looked around my office. The custom mahogany desk, the view of the Space Needle, the award sitting on my shelf from Tech Weekly magazine. I picked up the phone. "Sarah, get me the legal team, and find me a physical copy of this month's Tech Weekly. I need to mail a package." It was time to investigate just how tight things really were, and exactly what kind of game Frank was playing. I didn't send the money. I sent a large, rigid envelope via overnight courier. Inside was a single copy of Tech Weekly. The cover featured a stark, high-contrast portrait of me, arms crossed, staring dead into the camera lens. The headline in bold crimson letters read, "The Billion-Dollar Algorithm, How Faith Miller Turned a Backpack into an Empire." Underneath, in smaller text, "Startup of the Year." I took a black Sharpie and wrote a note on a sticky note, placing it directly over my face on the cover. I figured it out. I tracked the package. It was delivered at 10:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. At 10:55 a.m., my personal cell phone, which I had changed 3 times since leaving, but Frank had likely found through a people search site, began to ring. I let it ring, then it rang again, and again. Finally, I answered. I put it on speaker and set it on my desk, leaning back in my leather chair. "This is Faith." "You think you're funny?" Frank's voice filled the room, distorted by rage and static. There was no hello, no congratulations, just pure, unadulterated entitlement. "Hello, Frank," I said calmly. "I take it you got my mail." "I got a magazine," he spat. "I asked for help for your brother, and you send me a picture of yourself. What is this? You think you're better than us now because you got your picture in a paper." "It's a national publication, actually," I corrected him, checking my nails. "And I didn't send it to show off. I sent it to answer your question. You asked if I was doing decent. The article explains that my company was just valued at 9 figures. So yes, I'm doing decent. There was a silence on the line. I could hear him breathing, processing the number. 9 figures. So, Frank's tone shifted instantly. The aggression melted away, replaced by a greasy, wheedling tone that was infinitely more repulsive. So, you're rich, that's great, Faith. We always knew you were smart. That's why we pushed you so hard, you know? That tough love. It made you hungry. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Tough love, you sold my laptop 2 days before finals to buy Tyler a toy. You didn't push me, Frank. You tried to cripple me. Oh, stop living in the past, Frank dismissed, his voice gaining confidence. Look, if you have that kind of money, 5 grand is nothing to you. It's pocket change. Your brother needs this. This girl, Jessica, her family is high society. We need to make a good impression. You owe us that much. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. You put a roof over my head until I was 18, then charged me rent to live in a closet, I said. And I don't owe you anything. I'm not sending the money, Frank. Now wait a minute, Frank's voice hardened again. You can't do that. We already told Jessica's parents that the deposit was covered. We told them you were covering it as a wedding gift. If you don't pay, we lose the venue. Tyler will be humiliated. That sounds like a problem for someone resourceful, I said. Figure it out. I hung up. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a strange, vibrating anger. He had already promised my money to strangers. He was using my name, a name he hadn't spoken with kindness in years, to buy social standing for Tyler. I buzzed Sarah again. Get me a private investigator, the best one in the city. I need a full financial workup on Frank and Susan Miller and a background check on a Tyler Miller. And find out everything you can about a Jessica he's engaged to. If Frank was desperate enough to call me after 4 years of silence, it wasn't just about a party. There was rot underneath the floorboards, and I was going to find it. The investigator, a man named Mr. Vance, who smelled of peppermint and old leather, delivered the digital dossier to my secure server 48 hours later. I sat in my office with the lights dimmed, scrolling through the PDF. The blue light of the screen illuminated a disaster that was far worse than I had imagined. Frank and Susan weren't just tight, they were drowning. They had taken out a second mortgage on the house 3 years ago, right around the time Tyler Well. D have needed bail for a DUI that I saw listed in the public records. That money was gone. Maxed credit cards, loans from predatory payday lenders. But the real bombshell was Tyler. According to the report, Tyler hadn't held a job in 2 years. However, his social media, which Vance had scraped and archived, painted a different picture. He was posing as a crypto entrepreneur and a day trader. He posted photos of the new gaming rig, the one bought with my laptop money, claiming it was his trading station. And then there was Jessica. Jessica Vance, no relation to the pie, was the daughter of a local real estate mogul. Her family was legitimately wealthy. The dossier included notes from an informant. Subject, Tyler, has represented himself to the fiancé as a silent partner in a Seattle-based tech firm. I stopped scrolling, my blood went cold. A Seattle-based tech firm. He wasn't just asking me for money. He was pretending to be me, or at least pretending to be part of my success. My phone rang again. It was Susan this time. Faith, her voice was tremulous, weepy, the good cop to Frank's bad cop. Please, honey, your father is in a state. His blood pressure is through the roof. Why are you doing this to us? Mom, I said, my voice flat. Why does Tyler's fiancé think he's a partner in a tech firm? Susan went silent. The gasp on the other end gave her away instantly. We didn't say that exactly, she stammered. Tyler just. He told her he helped you start up, that he gave you the seed money. You know, from the laptop sale. Technically, that money did help you leave, so it's not a lie. He just wants to look good for her, Faith. She's his soulmate. If she finds out he's between opportunities, she might leave. He's unemployed, Mom. He's in debt. You are in debt, and you're conning this girl. It's not a con, Susan shrieked, her mask slipping. It's a temporary setback. Once they're married, her father is going to give Tyler a position in the real estate firm. This marriage is his fresh start. It's our way out. If you don't pay for this party, the lie falls apart and we lose everything. So you want me to fund the deception that traps this poor girl in a marriage based on lies? We want you to support your family, Susan yelled. We saw the magazine. You have millions. You selfish, ungrateful girl. You have millions and you won't give $5,000 to save your brother's life. I'm not saving his life, I said, watching the cursor blink on my screen. I'm prolonging his adolescence. If you don't send the check by Friday, Susan hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper I hadn't heard since childhood, your father is going to go to the press. He's going to tell Tech Weekly and everyone else that the Startup of the Year CEO abandoned her sick, elderly parents and destitute brother. He'll sue you for familial support. He'll make you look like a monster. Threats, blackmail. I looked at the dossier again. I looked at the date of the engagement party. It was in 3 days. It wasn't just a party. It was a mixer where Tyler was supposed to be formally introduced to Jessica's extended family and business partners. You want me to come to the party? I asked softly. We want the check, Susan said, but, yes, if you come and you play the part, if you back up Tyler's story, we'll forget about the lawsuit. I closed the dossier. A plan formed in my mind. It was sharp, surgical, and absolutely final. Okay, I said, I'll be there and I'll bring the check. Good, Susan breathed, the relief palpable. Good girl, the country club. Saturday at 6:00 p.m. Dress nice. I hung up the phone. I wasn't going to bring a check. I was going to bring the truth. I looked at the printer in the corner of my office. Sarah, I called out, my voice steady and strong. Clear my schedule for Saturday and book the corporate jet. We're going home. The flight to my hometown was spent in the pressurized silence of a Gulfstream cabin, a silence that cost more per hour than my father had made in his best year. I spent the time reviewing the dossier one last time, memorizing the dates, the amounts, and the lies. I wasn't just bringing a check. I was bringing an autopsy report of their deception. I rented a car at the private airfield, a charcoal gray sedan that whispered rather than roared. I didn't want to draw attention to my arrival until I was in the room. I wanted to see the stage before I walked onto it. The country club was exactly as I remembered it from the pictures in the local paper. Faux colonial architecture, manicured hedges that looked like they were cut with nail scissors, and an air of desperate exclusivity. This was where the town's elite came to pretend they weren't terrified of the recession. I walked in at 6:15 p.m. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, golden shadows across the banquet hall. The room was filled with round tables draped in tea linen, centered with elaborate floral arrangements that smelled of lilies and money. I spotted them immediately. Frank was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too tight across the shoulders, his face flushed with the kind of manic energy that comes from gambling with money you don't have. Susan was in a sequin gown, clutching a champagne flute like a life preserver. And Tyler was holding court near the bar. He looked polished, I had to give him that. He was wearing a tailored suit, laughing at something a gray-haired man was saying, looking every inch the young, successful entrepreneur. Beside him stood a woman who could only be Jessica. She was beautiful, with a kind, open face that radiated nervous excitement. She looked at Tyler with absolute adoration. It made my stomach turn. She wasn't an accomplice, she was the mark. I took a breath, smoothed the lapels of my blazer, and stepped into the light. A vase. It was Susan who saw me first. Her eyes widened, scanning me from head to toe. She took in the simple, severe cut of my designer suit, the lack of jewelry, the professional air. She rushed over, her heels clicking on the parquet floor, Frank trailing close behind. You made it, she hissed, grabbing my arm. Her grip was iron. You're late, and why aren't you wearing a dress? This is a formal event. I'm wearing Yves Saint Laurent, Mom, I said, gently but firmly removing her hand from my arm. I think it meets the dress code. Frank moved in close, blocking me from the view of the other guests. The smell of scotch on his breath was overpowering. "Do you have it?" he whispered, his eyes darting around. "The check, did you bring it?" "I brought everything we discussed," I said calmly. "Where is the happy couple?" "Don't cause a scene," Frank warned, his finger jabbing toward my face. "You go over there, you smile, you tell Jessica's father, that's him, Mr. Holloway, by the bar, that you're so proud of your brother and that Aegis wouldn't exist without his initial investment. You got that? One slip up and I call the reporter." "I know the script, Frank," I said. I walked past them. The room seemed to quiet down as I approached the bar. People were staring. Maybe they recognized me from the magazine, or maybe I just carried an energy that didn't fit in this room of forced politeness. Tyler saw me. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of genuine terror behind the eyes, before he plastered the grin back on. "Faith," he boomed, opening his arms. "Everyone, this is my sister, the genius of the family. Faith, come here." He hugged me. It was a performance. He patted my back hard, leaning in to whisper in my ear, "Play along, or I swear to God I'll ruin you." I pulled back and looked at him. "Hello, Tyler, congratulations." "Faith, this is Jessica," Tyler said, gesturing to the woman beside him. Jessica beamed, extending a hand. "Oh, Faith, I am so honored to finally meet you. Tyler talks about you constantly. He's so proud of what you two built together. I mean, to go from a garage startup to, well, to this, it's inspiring." I took her hand. It was warm and trembling slightly. "He told you we built it together?" I asked, keeping my voice pleasant. "Well, not the coding, obviously," Jessica laughed, glancing at her father, Mr. Holloway, who was now listening in. "But he told us about the seed capital. How he sold his bonds to fund your first server stack. That's what I love about him. He believes in family." Mr. Holloway nodded approvingly. "Rare thing these days, a young man who puts his money where his heart is. Faith, your brother tells me he's a silent partner, but I've been trying to get him to take a more active role in my firm. If he has an eye for tech like he seems to, he'll be a violently asset." The room was waiting. Frank and Susan were hovering on the periphery, their eyes burning holes into the back of my head. This was the moment. I could nod, hand over the check, and buy their silence. I could let Jessica marry a fraud and let my parents continue to drain the life out of everyone around them. I reached into my bag. "Actually," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the gathered crowd, "I have a wedding gift. I thought now would be the perfect time to present it, since we're talking about how this all started." Frank relaxed visibly. Tyler let out a breath he had been holding. They thought I was pulling out the check. I pulled out the magazine. "This is the latest issue of Tech Weekly," I said, holding it up. "Mr. Holloway, I think you'll find the article on page 42 interesting. It details the capitalization table of Aegis and Nova Systems." Tyler frowned. "Faith, what are you doing?" "And this," I continued, pulling out a thick, bound document, the Pi's dossier, and placing it on the bar counter with a heavy thud, "is the financial history of the silent partner." I turned to Jessica. The room was deathly silent now. The clinking of silverware had stopped. The string quartet in the corner trailed off. "Jessica," I said, my voice steady but soft, directed only at her. "My brother did not fund my company. He has never owned a bond in his life. 4 years ago, 2 days before my final exams, our father sold my study laptop, the one containing my thesis, to a pawn shop." "Faith, shut up," Frank roared, lunging forward. I didn't flinch. I turned my gaze on him, cold and sharp as a diamond cutter. "He sold it for $300 to buy Tyler a gaming computer. He told me to figure it out. So I did. I left. I built Aegis from a shelter in Seattle with nothing but the clothes on my back. Tyler didn't give me seed money. He took my only tool. He hasn't had a job in 2 years. The trading station he showed you is for video games, and the money for this party." They tried to blackmail me into paying for it 3 days ago." "Liar," Susan screamed, her voice shrill and hysterical. "She's lying, she's mentally unstable. She's always been jealous of Tyler." I looked at Mr. Holloway. The document on the bar contains bank statements, foreclosure notices for my parents' home, and Tyler's arrest record for the DUI he told you was a parking dispute. It also contains the email thread where my father threatened to smear my reputation if I didn't pay for this party. I pushed the dossier toward Jessica. "I didn't come here to ruin your night, Jessica," I said. "I came here because I refuse to let you marry a man who is marrying you for a bailout. You are the exit strategy." Tyler's face was a mask of crumbling plaster. He looked at Jessica, panic seizing his features. "Babe, don't listen to her. She's crazy. She's obsessed with me. It's a sibling rivalry thing." Jessica looked at Tyler. Then she looked at the magazine on the bar, where my face stared out with undeniable authority. Then she looked at the dossier. She reached out and opened the folder. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a carefully constructed reality shattering into dust. Jessica read the first page, then the second. Her hands started to shake. She looked up at Tyler, her eyes filling with tears, but behind the tears, there was a dawn of horrific realization. "You said you managed a portfolio," she whispered. "This says you have a credit score of 420 and wage garnishments." "Jess, baby, I can explain," Tyler stammered, reaching for her. "Don't touch me," she said. It wasn't a scream, it was a flat, dead command. She stepped back, bumping into her father. Mr. Holloway picked up the dossier. He scanned it with the speed of a man who read contracts for a living. His face went purple. He looked at Frank, who was now sweating profusely, trying to loosen his bow tie. "You told me the deposit was covered by a trust fund," Mr. Holloway growled. It was a liquidity issue," Frank sputtered. "Faith was supposed to, she promised." "Get out," Mr. Holloway said. His voice was low, vibrating with the kind of power Frank could only dream of possessing. "Get out of my club. Get out of my daughter's life. If you ever contact her again, I will bury you under so much litigation you won't be able to breathe." "But the engagement," Susan wailed, looking around at the guests who were now openly staring, whispering, judging. "The invitations." "There is no engagement," Jessica said, her voice breaking. She took off the ring, a ring I realized with a sick jolt was likely paid for by a maxed-out credit card in Susan's name, and dropped it into a half-empty glass of champagne. "It's over." Frank turned on me. His eyes were wild, filled with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. He raised a hand as if to strike me. "You ungrateful little witch. You ruined everything. I'll sue you. I'll tell the press everything." I didn't step back. I pulled my phone from my pocket. "Go ahead, Frank. Sue me. But before you do, you should know that I have a legal team on retainer who specialize in defamation and extortion. And I have the recording of your phone call from Tuesday. If you mention my name to a reporter, or if you ever try to contact me again, I will file charges for attempted extortion and fraud." I took a step closer to him, towering over him in my heels. "You told me to be resourceful," I said, my voice echoing in the silent hall. I figured it out. And now you're going to have to figure out how to pay for this party." Frank's hand dropped. He looked at the room full of people, at Mr. Holloway's fury, at his weeping wife and ruined son. He shrank. For the first time in my life, I saw him for what he was, a small, bitter man standing in the wreckage of his own ego. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked away, Susan trailing him, sobbing into her hands. Tyler looked at Jessica one last time, saw the stone wall of her father standing beside her, and slunk away after his parents. The room exhaled. I stood there. For a moment, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving a trembling exhaustion in its wake. A vase. I turned. Jessica was standing there. Her makeup was running, and she looked devastated, but she was standing upright. "Thank you," she whispered. I softened. I walked over to her. I'm sorry, Jessica. I really am. You didn't deserve this. No, she shook her head, wiping her eyes. I didn't, but better to know now than after the wedding, right? She looked at the dossier on the bar. You saved me. He would have drained me dry, wouldn't he? Yes, I said honestly, he would have. Mr. Holloway stepped forward, placing a hand on Jessica's shoulder. He looked at me with a new expression, respect. You're the CEO of Aegis. I am. I read about your acquisition, he said, nodding slowly. Impressive work. You have integrity, Ms. Miller. That's a rare commodity. If you ever need anything in this town, well, you call us. I appreciate that, I said, but I don't think I'll be coming back to this town. I looked around the room one last time. It didn't look scary anymore. It didn't look impressive. It just looked like a room. I walked out of the country club into the cool night air. The stars were bright above the parking lot, clearer than they ever were in Seattle. I walked to my rental car, my heels clicking on the asphalt. I had come here looking for justice, maybe even a little revenge. But as I sat in the driver's seat and started the engine, I realized I hadn't just gotten revenge. I had gotten liberation. The cord was cut, the debt was paid. The study in the hallway was just a memory now, powerless to hurt me. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I selected the folder marked Family. I clicked Select All, then I clicked Delete Forever. I put the car in gear and drove toward the airfield. I had a company to run and a life, a real, vibrant, hard-earned life, waiting for me. I had figured it out.